Hello, traveler. Welcome back to my channel. I am very excited today because we have another book review. It has actually been a long time in the making. I've been wanting to do this book for so long. We're going to be talking about The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I am so stoked by this book. I can already tell you right now, it is one of the best books that I've read in the last few years. I can't wait to tell you what I loved about it. This is going to be spoiler free, so if you're worried you haven't read it yet, spoiler free, as much as that can possibly be done in a review. And I am stoked to share this thing with you. If this is your first time stopping by, I am Zach Adams. I am a writer and I avidly read. On the channel, we talk about both of those things, as well as there's a podcast in here that I have with my buddy about the similarities between coding, like computer coding, and writing fiction. Both are writing. So we talk about the similarities we find between our practices and our processes and the industry itself and all sorts of stuff. If that sounds at all interesting to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Where to start with this book? Hands down, fantastic. Loved this thing. I think for me, I'm going to have to start in the plot, specifically how the plot is structured and the form that Reid uses in order to convey that plot. The book is set up investigating this woman's experience with her 7 husbands, and I absolutely love defining sections of the book, the character progression, in relationship to the men in this woman's life, considering that that woman was constantly in control of her situation. She is constantly using and manipulating these men, and she is constantly the master of her own destiny in any number of ways throughout the book. And so that really, just through the form of the book in itself and through the chapter by chapter reading, really lends to the second part, which I love about this book, which is the subversion of any different kinds of tropes that Reid does in this book. Not only are there expectations that you would guess from a movie star coming through the 50s, 60s, 70s that are blasted apart. That is not the story you're reading. If that's the book you're looking for, you're not going to find it here, where you would expect an enemies to lovers trope or any sort of, like, oh, we've worked in close proximity trope or love at first sight tropes or any of these other sort of tropes you would expect in a romance book. It's here, it's not here, it's twisted. They're all subverted in the same way that your expectations of a woman who has 7 husbands defining herself by the men that she's with, never being defined by the men she's with. 100%. That is one of the things I love about this book, is the way that Reid subverts expectations. The writer in me, of course, has to stop through and say that I do love the prose in this book. It is wonderfully descriptive at the times it needs to be descriptive. Specifically, she does a fantastic job in characterization in prose. Her dialogue is great. You get such a crisp mental image from the way that these characters talk. You almost feel like you know them far before they're ever physically described. You get their attitudes and their mentalities and the way that they look at the world through the way that they talk. And that is a 100% great dialogue in this. Fantastic characterization comes through. Thomas Wolfe is a early 1900s writer who is sort of really known for his very flowery, over-exaggerated abundance of almost poetic waxing in his novels. But he was edited by the same person who edited Hemingway and edited Fitzgerald, and was sort of reined in and really learned through the course of the few novels that he was edited by the same person who edited Hemingway and edited Fitzgerald, and was really reined in and learned through the course of his books that if you're going to write these large flowery sections, your powerful moments are going to come when you say the least, or when you say something that you normally would have said 4 or 5 times, you say it one way and you nail it home and you cut it and you're done. And I will say that in a similar way, she mirrors that style in this book. And in moments where she needs to basically hit her haymaker and get out of there, it's done. It's nailed every single time. And there's even specific lines that she echoes through the book where you are calling scenes forward, and that powerful moment is echoed with powerful moments the characters are feeling in their own current lives instead of the 1950s, 60s, 70s stories that's being told. Oh, it's great. I'm going to read you one of those lines for me that worked just fantastically well. This is just on a single page. I'm going to have to skip parts because I don't want to spoil anything for you. I did not have the luxury of panic, so I got into the bed with him. I held his hand, even though it felt limp. Maybe I should have been mad at him for getting behind the wheel of a car when he'd been drinking. I couldn't ever get very mad at him. I knew he was always doing the very best he could with the pain he felt at any given moment, and this, however tragic, had been the best he could. I'm going to skip down a bit. Go knowing I love you purely, that you are an amazing father. Go knowing I told you all my secrets, because you are my best friend. He died an hour later. After he was gone, I had the devastating luxury of panic. Every time. Gets me every time. Even beyond the prose, the thing that I was hooked to, I was just hanging on the tension of the tug of war between the light and dark side of the characters in this. In a lot of fantasy fiction, you can get this sort of like, will they do the bad thing? Won't they do the bad thing? But the good and the bad things are so very cut and dry. And the grayness of a character is, oh, they will betray their friends, but they won't kill innocents, right? Like that. And it's like, okay, well, this guy's sort of good. But if you really look at it, it's just like, okay, he's not a sociopathic monster, but he's like also just not a good person. This doesn't have that. When these characters are morally gray, they're morally gray in very human ways, very self-serving in the moment, driven by emotion, very, I can't say it any other way but human. It feels so real. And it really, when I said the characterization was done well in dialogue, the actions of these characters throughout the thing, you cannot go through here without going, love her. I love this character. She's so great, and she's powerful, and she's witty, and she's smart, and she's insightful. You turned all of those things, all of the characteristics that I loved about her, and she just used them to be selfish and manipulative and petty and now she's used all of those things again to try and fix this other relationship that's falling apart, and she's making so many sacrifices in that area. And then it's so very human. And I loved how much interplay I was feeling between, do I like this character? Do I not like this character? Is this person meant to be an idol? They're presented as an idol. Is this person meant to be the protege of this person because they were sort of set up to be this like good person, and now they're sort of being manipulative? And are they doing, like, it's all the characters, past, present, like main, side characters, they're all up and down in this regard, and I love it. The final part that I love about this book, and I may come back and give a little snippet on whether or not this is true, but this book already has me wanting to reread it. And it's 100% because of the ending. And without giving too much away, there's not one twist. There are many twists. The last 100 pages of the 370-page book, I want to say. Yeah, right around there, 390-page book. The last 100 pages are twist and turn and subversion and reassumptions, and there's so much going on. And it is really a sort of masterclass from Reid on how you can lay the groundwork of a novel very early on. You can drop a bunch of hints, I'm sure, which is what I believe is going to make this rereadable. Because it made sense when I got to the end that the things happened the way they did, and the things were the way they were, and that the book ends the way it ends. And that only made sense because there were those things presented early enough in the book that I felt this was a natural conclusion. And I bet that I missed things. And the rereadability of this will be like, oh my gosh, how did I miss this the first time? This is so cool that she managed to do this. This is sort of a writer-y part where I'm geeking out, but it's one of those things where it's like, this is so neat that she was able to wrap this in And it's just such a well-presented story. It makes so much sense when you get to the end that you want to go back to the beginning and go, man, how did this all come together? Because there are so many little subplots that you're watching come up throughout little areas of the book, and you're just like, oh, okay, that's cool, that's neat. You don't think of it, or you don't, because of the way the pacing is, and there's so much other interesting subplots going up and down and coming around, that when it all comes together at the end, it lands just right. It's just so perfect. I'm not even going to mess around with this. This book is getting 5 stars for me. I expect that we will see this book on any number of awards in the future. I imagine people will be reading this for a bunch of reasons. For those of you out there who say things like, man, I wish that they could just tell a good story and not make it political. There are hundreds of political topics in here. This is a good story. It is a good story first. More importantly, it is a good story because of the tensions that people often find, oh, this is too political and this and this and this. And this humanizes so many topics that people have a problem discussing, a problem getting into. You can't help but like characters that you may traditionally not like, that you may have some kind of prejudice against. You don't find out you would have that prejudice until you already know that you like them, which is what happens in real life. It's fantastic. People will be reading it for those reasons. People will be reading it because it is a fantastically well-written book. Yes. Best new book that I've read in the last 2 years. Hands down. I'm glad that you were able to come with me on this journey. I hope that you will read this book. Go read this book. I will leave a link in the description to get this book. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. If you finish the book, please come tell me what you think about it, because I could talk about this book day in and day out. Ask my friends. I'm forcing all of them to read it. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey with me. I have been Zach Adams. Thanks for stopping by, traveler.